The Repulsor is a heavily armored and armed battle transport employed by the Space Marines. Introduced with the Primaris Marines, it's one of the more recent vehicles, and one of the slightly more divisive ones. I don't mind it, though I do prefer the tracked look for vehicles. Hello everybody, my name is Spoons Rattling, and today we are covering the Repulsor Dreadnought on about an hour of sleep last night. So, let's get into it. So, the Repulsor comes in at a pretty cheap 180 points. Now you do get a very solid profile for this. Movement 10 inches is pretty fast for a bulky transport. Toughness 12 is of course always solid against most anti-tank weapons. 3+ save is only so-so. It would be nice if it was 2+. However, that just means it benefits from cover more, as well as the fact that, obviously you're going to have some trade-offs for this points cost. It does have the full 16 wounds, which means this thing is pretty dang tough for the points. You're getting quite a lot of wounds at a high toughness count for a low points cost. Now, as befitting of a vehicle of this stature, it does have quite a few weapons. In terms of its main armament, it can mount either an Onslaught Gatling Cannon or a Las Talon. The Onslaught Gatling Cannon has 12 attacks, with devastating wounds that hit on 3s at 24-inch range, strength 6, AP 0, and damage 1. Then, the Las Talon is 2 attacks that hit on 3s at 36-inch range, strength 10, AP 3, and damage D6 plus 1. This is, of course, a very solid anti-light vehicle, anti-medium vehicle profile, and is overall very solid. Not that the Gatling Cannon is bad, devastating wounds is always solid, and it does sort of lean more so into its anti-infantry roles. Speaking of, the Repulsor defensive array is 18 attacks that hit on 3s, 24-inch range with strength 4, AP 0, and damage 1. This is a very good light horde clearer, very good against things like guardsmen. In terms of other armaments, it can take either a hull-mounted twin las cannon or twin heavy bolter. The twin las cannon is 1 attack, twin linked, that hits on 3s at 48-inch range, strength 12, AP 3, and damage D6 plus 1. The heavy bolter is of course twin, sustained hits 1, and at 3 attacks, ballistic skill 3+, 36-inch range, strength 5, AP 1, and damage 2. Now, I've been quite outspoken about how much I enjoy heavy bolters, but the twin las cannon I think is simply superior. Though I would understand taking the heavy bolters if you really want to slant this thing to just chew through infantry very quickly. In terms of melee weapons, it's a very uninteresting armored bulk kind of profile. This is I believe it's got armored hull with 6 attacks that hit on 4s at strength 8, AP 0, and damage 1. At least with the high strength, it does have a solid chance of crushing through a few guardsmen, or similar if they rely on just their poor saves. They will certainly feel it, though again, this thing doesn't really want to be charged in combat. However, it has no blast weapons, so that is of course a benefit. In terms of abilities, it has Deadly Demise D6, as it is quite a huge unit. And then Emergency Combat Embarkation is its ability. If the opponent's charge phase, once they declare their charge targets, if that target is within 3 inches of this model, it can embark within the transport. Very useful for a variety of reasons. This is, of course, a very powerful ability for 180 points, and interestingly swaps this transport from being better with melee troops to being better with ranged troops. This is, of course, very solid, and does give it its own niche compared to some of the other transports. In terms of transport spots, it has 14 slots, which Gravis and Terminators take up 2, and then Centurions take up 4. 3? 3 or 4. Regardless, you can fit 3 Centurions inside it. One last weapon, this thing can take a Hunter Slayer missile, which is indirect in 1 shot, 1 attack that hits on 3s, 48-inch range, strength 4, AP 3, and damage D6. This is just a slightly better Hunter Killer missile, and is overall a nice thing to bring along, just for a little bit of extra anti-armor punch. In terms of best build, I'm partial to the Las Cannon, Las Talon, Hunter Slayer, and of course, that's the only options you have. The Repulsor fills an interesting niche in the Space Marines. Unsurprisingly, they have a unit for just about every niche, where the Repulsor is not quite as heavy investment as either its Executioner cousin, or as expensive as its Land Raider predecessor, who still seems to be its superior in a lot of ways. However, I believe the Repulsor still has its uses, mainly in its synergy with shooting units, especially since a lot of good shooting units tend to be quite fragile. And in terms of that, I believe the 2 best units you could use this with are either Eradicators or a unit of Hell Blasters with buffing characters, whether that be Azrael or Lieutenant, or both. I think both of these do have their own values. Eradicators deliver very nasty anti-tank, and of course really appreciate the speed of the transport to get them to where they need to be much quicker. Though I do think Hell Blasters are of course always a solid option, as they tend to be. In terms of the Repulsor itself, its own damage isn't exceptional compared to things like Land Raiders, but it isn't necessarily bad either. As significantly more up-armed than, say, a Repulsor, and with its las array, it is genuinely pretty solid against medium vehicles, though its las talon will struggle against toughness 12 things like repulsors, land raiders, or knights. Of course, a twin-linked las cannon does help with that. And then the repulsor defensive array, as I mentioned, is quite solid to keep this thing from getting stuck by chaff. Things like Gretchen or Imperial Guard will have to fear losing quite a hefty amount even with the low AP. That also means it, of course, benefits from AP buffs exceptionally. Like most units, it's right at home at Gladius, and with most vehicles, it's right at home in Ironstorm. However, I prefer it in Gladius, or in any other detachment where it doesn't necessarily get direct buffs, but is useful for delivering units. In Gladius, you could give it extra AP, which would certainly be appreciated on all of its weapons, through the Storm of Fire stratagem. Anyways, I've been Spoons Rattling. That just about covers everything. Hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and hopefully next time I'll have a little bit more energy and I'll have more than 1 hour of sleep under my belt.